And on behalf of the Utah Debate Commission, we're pleased to come to you tonight from Utah Tech University's Eccles Fine Arts Center. We're hearing from two candidates who have met the qualifications for this debate. The candidates are Celeste Maloy and Nathaniel Woodward. We're looking forward to a lively and a civil debate with the goal of giving Utah voters first-hand exposure to candidates and good information for decision-making. If you'd like to participate via social media, we encourage your comments. Use the hashtag UTDebates on social media. A random drawing held prior to the debate determined that candidate Woodward will get the initial response to the first question. We will then alternate turns on the remaining questions throughout the debate. And it's time to begin. And the first question, I hope, is an easy one. We want to get to know you. What should a voter know about you, Mr. Woodward? And before they cast their ballot, what would you like them to know?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Representative Maloy, for sharing this stage with me today. What I believe a voter needs to know about me personally is that there's not a lot to know about me. I am thoroughly an average person. I'm not special as I was extra gifted in school or I've gone too far in my career due to my own strengths or abilities. I am me, a boy from Price, who's always been a boy from Price and who always will be a boy from Price. I am normal. I like to live my normal life, sit in my garden, read a book, go to work, argue with the PTA, and enjoy activities in my small town with my children. That's who I am. Now, what can I be is a question we should all consider for ourselves. As a boy from coal country, to stand on this stage is a remarkable thing for me to think of. And I believe that's who you should know about me, is that I don't know if I belong here, but I'm happy I am.
And that is time. Thank you so much for that answer. Same question to you, Ms. Maloy. What should a voter know about you before they cast their ballot?
Well, the number one thing I hope the voters know about me before they go vote for me is that being here representing them is the honor and privilege of my lifetime up to this point. It's not something that I expected to do, but it's something I have thoroughly enjoyed doing. I am a problem solver. I like listening to people, hearing their problems and addressing them, and this job is the ultimate problem-solving job. When it's done well, it requires a lot of travel, a lot of listening, and a lot of empathy. It's a job that you can't do without your heart and your brain, and I have spent the last 10 months in Congress using as much of my heart and my brain as I can to serve the people of the 2nd District, and I look forward to having an opportunity to serve them through a full term in Congress.
All right. And Ms. Maloy, the next question goes to you first, and you'll have a minute to answer this question about water. Utah's rapid population growth and agricultural demands strain our limited water resources. Now, as a member of Congress, how will you work with federal, state, and local entities to craft innovative water policies?
Well, Utah's already being innovative about water policy, so that's the first thing I want everybody to understand. My job as a federal representative is to support the state. The state of Utah is on the cutting edge of water reuse and conservation and making sure that the limited water supplies we have here in the state go as far as they can. And that is the level of government that should be doing that. Water is in the state's jurisdiction. As a member of the federal delegation, I am part of the Colorado River Caucus, and part of the reason that I joined that caucus is to make sure that Congress doesn't get involved where we shouldn't be and step on the state's toes while the states are being innovative and making sure they provide clean, safe drinking water to the residents of Utah. So I'm supporting the state, making sure my colleagues are educated on Utah's needs and that we're being innovative in our water, and I look forward to seeing the population of Utah continue to grow and have drinking water as we innovate and use the water the best we can.
Mr. Woodward, same question. How would you support innovative water policies?
It's important to recognize that water is one of the most complicated issues that's going to be affecting us in the near future and for decades to come. If you look at the firms, the investment firms out of New York and California that predicted the 2008 housing market crash, they're currently investing heavily in water and water shares. Living in Price, I understand the issues that the mega drought has brought. We have had to ration water for many, many years. In addition to, we have to be good neighbors to those downstream from us. Now, in the coming years, we don't know how much rainfall or snowpack we're going to get, but we need to be able to not just hedge our bets, but be proactive on how we're going to regulate what we do with the water that falls here and then moves on to our neighbors down the river. We need to look at solutions that involve the federal government getting involved with Southern California, building desalination plants, and then trading back us those water rights in order for us to sustain ourselves in the near future.
We want to stick with land and water issues for a moment, so this is still going to go first to Ms. Maloy. This question about public lands. The state of Utah is funding advertisements that take a stand on one side of an issue that really does divide Utahns. The effort is called Stand for Our Lands, asking residents to support the state's lawsuit to gain control of much of the land that's currently under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Land Management. Do you support that state effort, and if so, why?
I do support the state's effort. I think it's a really thoughtful effort, and I think they're asking the right question. So the state filed a lawsuit with the Supreme Court asking the right question, and that question is, should the federal government be able to hold land in perpetuity that hasn't been designated to a specific use? And I think it's fair to ask the Supreme Court to answer that question. If the Constitution's charge the federal government to dispose of public land means they can hold on to public land, then we need to know the answer. Can they do that in perpetuity? And Utah isn't the only state that needs an answer to that question. And I think in the past we've jumped to the remedy too soon and asked for a specific remedy before we answered that question. I think Utah's being thoughtful and careful, and I support what they're doing because we do need an answer to that question. Is it going to be this way forever, or is the federal government going to dispose of that land at some point?
All right. And Mr. Woodward, your thoughts on Stand for Our Lands?
I am hesitant to fully get on board with any type of lawsuit that goes against the federal government with this type of rhetoric. Now, I do support the notion and the idea of transferring back a significant portion of this federally owned land to state control. Now, I live in Carbon and Emery counties. Over 90% of these two counties are owned by the BLM or other federal organizations or departments. What's important to understand here is when people say our public lands, they need to know that some of us actually live on them. And so what happens there is much more impactful than just what we do with it. And so my hesitancy with this lawsuit is the people who are bringing it. The vast majority of the lawmakers in the state are either developers themselves or in bed with those same companies and funders. And so I would like to see this act led by people who live on the public lands, and we transfer those public lands not just back to the state, but to the SITLA program.
That is time. Before we get to our next student question, I did want to follow up because neither of you addressed the part of the question about the state advertising to residents, to citizens, to support the state's place in this lawsuit. Is that an appropriate thing for a government entity to do?
Are you starting with me?
Yes, I'm asking you first, Ms. Maloy. 15 seconds or 30 seconds at the most.
I do think it's an appropriate use of state dollars, if that's what you're asking. The state filed a lawsuit. This is something that is unprecedented in asking this question, and the people of Utah have a right to know what the state's doing. And the fact that they're being proactive about informing residents in Utah about what they're doing so that they're not just getting it from headlines, I think is a wise stewardship on the part of the state, and I do support it.
Mr. Woodward?
I'm going to once again somewhat hedge on my answer, and I do support it, but I'm hesitant to fully support it because it is so biased. It's coming with too much of the fluff and not enough of the neutral standpoint. You have to advertise it so people will watch it, of course, but I'm more worried about the use of taxpayer dollars to sell an agenda in a way that doesn't fully address what's actually happening.
All right, now we're going to turn to a student here from Utah Tech, Carson Collins. Carson is going to ask a question, and Carson, the first person to answer your question will be Mr. Woodward.
Perfect. Hi, the cost of living in our area has increased and become overwhelming for students and young professionals. What specific policies do you plan to implement to ensure affordable housing, reasonable living expenses, and an actual solution to the issue of inflation?
Thank you for that question. That is much more of a question than a 60-second answer could possibly hope to really get into. And so what I would bring up to your attention is a proposal I've brought to the attention of many people in Washington so far, and that is to revisit the idea of manifest destiny, to reopen the Homestead Act. We have lots of federal public land available. That is not necessarily the public lands you're thinking of when you think of the advertisings. There's lots of space to grow and build new towns. So what better way to address inflation than to create more cities in which to house people and to build and construct and to expand? This goes back to the water issue, where we could build those desalination plants in Southern California, make a whole federal program of this, and let the newer generations, the Gen Z and the millennials who've been priced out of the market, literally go and manifest our own destiny. I think that's something my generation, and hopefully your generation, will find appealing and something we can really sink our teeth into and define who we are for ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Woodward. Ms. Maloy?
That's a great question. Utah's a wonderful place to live. A lot of people are moving here, but if we want it to stay a wonderful place to live, young people have to be able to afford to stay here. Most of the policy inputs to housing affordability are state and local inputs, and as a member of the federal delegation, I try to stay out of their lane. But there are things that we can do and that I am doing at the federal level to make that easier. For example, as a member of the House of Representatives, I voted against large spending bills that are outside of the appropriations process. When the federal government pumps a lot of dollars into the economy, it causes inflation. So that's one of the things I'm doing to fight inflation. I've also introduced permitting reform bills and other bills that simplify federal government processes so that we're not artificially inflating the prices of energy, power, and the building blocks of houses to make the end product, the home, more expensive. Those are things that we are doing at the federal level to support the efforts at the local level.
Thank you.
All right, you got your answers, Carson? Great, thank you. This is going to go to Ms. Maloy first, and it is related. We're going to be talking about debt reduction, but we also want to talk about seniors. Carson was talking about students and young people, but seniors often live on fixed incomes. And so when we talk about debt reduction, experts on the debt say that in order to actually reduce it, you'd have to cut defense, Social Security, Medicare, and other mandatory spending, or increase taxes. So what do you do? Which of those is palatable to you?
So just to be clear, we should not be cutting defense spending right now. The world is a dangerous place. The only way for us to have peace is for America to be strong. But we do have to address mandatory spending. And that's something that I've been willing to take on since I first started running. I've been talking to my colleagues in the House about innovative plans. We don't have one that's ready to roll out yet. I don't have a 3-point plan to present here today. But I am willing to take on mandatory spending, and that's a change from where Congress has been in the past. And I think part of the reason we can have that conversation now is that seniors are also willing to have the conversation. In the past, it's been the third rail of politics. Seniors didn't want to talk about it, and it's going to take all of us. We're all going to have skin in the game to fix debt and deficit spending. And so I appreciate that the generation that came before me is now willing to say we can't keep going the way we're going. We're headed towards a disaster. Let's look at mandatory spending and find ways to fix it that don't harm people who are already on a fixed income and dependent on government programs. I think there are a lot of good answers out there. We just need to put them together into a package.
All right, and Mr. Woodward.
I am going to take a completely opposite approach to this and say that we absolutely have to reduce our defense spending. The Pentagon is yet to pass an audit. I can't remember the last time if they passed one at all. There needs to be consequences for agencies and organizations who spend our taxpayer dollars and don't actually account for what they're doing. I do agree that for a safe world, America does need to be strong, but I would take that a little bit further, saying that we don't just need strength, we need intelligence. We need to be able to operate in this world without waving a big stick, without the threat of invasion or us funding some other country's war. We need to be smarter and more compassionate with our money, and we need to hold those who are spending it more accountable for it, to the degree that if these departments or agencies do not pass an audit, the accountability has to be there, whether they have to clean house with their staff or we have to revisit whether that organization or department should even exist any longer.
All right, and I think the next question from student Ben Johnson here is going to be addressed to Mr. Woodward first, and it is you've teed this up nicely, both of you.
Thank you for taking my question. What is your stance on U.S. military aid to Israel and the Ukraine? What restrictions, if any, should come with this aid?
Once again, very hard thing to get out in just a soundbite amount of time here. War and conflict are complicated and also can be very simple as well. We know Russia's motivations in Ukraine, while in the Middle East, those motivations for those different states and their interaction with each other are, I think, a little less simple. And so we can't approach both of those situations the same way. We need to look at the context of that situation. So with the Ukraine matter with Russia, we need to take into account that there are several other allies in the area who need to stand up and be the strength that we've been behind that for a while now, but also recognizing that we do have skin in that game as well, and we need to make sure the people of Ukraine are safe. When it comes to the conflict in the Middle East right now, the biggest thing I want to advocate for is compassion and empathy. We have